Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to knit the two color brioche knit. Last week I did a video on the one color brioche knit, and as promised, here is the two color one. Now I wanted to just share with you a recent project that I finished with the two color brioche. This is just a cowl that is just knit up in the two color brioche and just into a loop that I've seamed here, as you can see, using the Kitchener stitch. And I used a colorway that had 5 different shades of pink. I have not yet blocked this work, but pretty much in each, and I just knit them up in sections. So after one section, I would change up the two colors and work on a different section. But in each section, really, it's only 2 colors. And because the brioche knit produces a fabric that's really flexible and flat, and it's reversible, so it's the same. It works both. The pattern looks good on both sides, but because of the color play with the two color brioche, you get a different sort of contrasting color or alternating colors on either side. And so I think it gives a really fun and beautiful effect. The other project I'm currently working on, which I haven't finished yet, is a wrap in these 2 colors of green. I had these 2 yarns with me a long time, and I thought, let me do something. And right now I'm so excited about the brioche stitch that I thought, hey, I'll just do a poncho wrap with this. So it's not yet done, but as you can see, it's in 2 shades of green, one side being the light and one side being the dark. I think once it's finished, it will hopefully look nice. Now, the one difference between the one color brioche knit and the 2 color brioche knit is that for the one color, you only needed, you could use regular needle, but for the 2 color brioche knit, you will need a double pointed needle, or you could use circular needles as I'm doing here. So essentially the needle has to have both ends pointed. And if you have a few number of stitches, like in the example I'm going to show you here in this video, you can use a double pointed needle. These are usually about 6 or 7 inches in length, but anything more than 25 stitches or so, depending on the bulkiness of the yarn, the short double pointed needle may not be enough. So you might need to switch over to a circular needle. Okay. So let me show you how the brioche stitch is worked, and I have provided the pattern down below in the video description field for the brioche stitch, and then the 2 color brioche stitch. And I have also provided a link to the long tail cast on video, because what I've done here is I've cast on 13 stitches using the long tail cast on method. Now, if you're using, for the 2 color brioche, you want to identify one of your colors as color A and color B. So for this demonstration, I'm using these 2 colors, this white and then this sort of dark red or maroon color. And so this is going to be my main color, this dark color, and I'm considering this my contrasting color. So in the pattern, you'll see me call it as main color and contrasting. You want to cast on the stitches with your main color, and then just like for this 1 stitch brioche or 1 color brioche knit, with the main color, you will need, excuse me, you will need to do a setup row. So you cast on the stitches with your main color, or color B as I'm calling it, and you will start the setup row with your contrasting color. And so I'm going to take the contrasting color, leave about a 4 to 6 inch tail or so, and then you start the setup row. So for the setup row, the very first stitch, we're just going to knit it. So you just insert as if to knit, make a loop. You don't have to tie a knot or anything, just make a loop and knit. Okay. Now, as you progress, make sure you're catching the part of the yarn that's the main part of the yarn and not the tail. And the next stitch, you're going to bring the yarn forward. Then you're going to slip this next stitch purlwise, as if so. Insert as if to purl and then just pull it over without doing anything. Now your yarn is still forward. With the yarn in the front, we're going to knit this next stitch. So insert and watch what happens. Again, as I am knitting, I have now created a stitch. And these 2 stitches together, these 2, kind of make up the brioche stitch. Okay, and you're pretty much going to do that through the end. So you bring the yarn forward, you slip that next stitch as if to purl, but just slip it over, and then you knit the next stitch with the yarn in the front. And so for the setup row, that's all you're doing. We'll just keep doing that through the rest of this row. So yarn forward, slip, and knit. Okay. Once you've come to that part, here's the key thing to remember, and this is where sometimes mistakes can happen when you're doing brioche, because we're so used to turning the work. After we're done, we just want to turn it and start working on the next row. But with brioche, you don't turn the work. So you do your setup row, and then you slide your stitches to this end of the needle. So if you're using a circular needle, you do the same thing. You'd slide them all the way over to the other end of the needle. And now we're gonna do the next. So after the setup row, there'll be 4 rows, and we'll be doing those with alternating the darker color and the lighter color, or your main color and your alternating color. Okay. So the next row, or rather the first row that you're doing as part of the pattern, you're gonna slip the first stitch purlwise, as if to purl. So just go in there and slip it. Okay. Then you'll notice we have those 2 stitches that are together, what I call that brioche stitch. We are just going to purl those 2 stitches together, or we're going to do what's called a brioche purl, or a burp, BRP. Now the yarn is right here, it's in the front. You're just going to purl it, drop both those stitches off. Okay, and then the next stitch you're going to slip. Now keep the yarn in the front. You're going to slip the next stitch purlwise, and then you're going to bring the yarn all the way over, and you're going to do the same thing again. So this is your repeat. Whenever you come to one of these brioche stitches, these brioche sort of 2 stitches joined together, you're going to insert into both and purl. Okay, then leaving the yarn in the front, you're going to slip that next stitch, and then you're going to take this yarn all the way around. Okay, sort of wrapping that stitch, and then we repeat. We're at a brioche stitch, those 2 stitches together, so we're going to purl them, and leaving the yarn in the front, we're going to slip that next stitch, then we're going to bring the yarn all the way around and repeat. So brioche purl or burp, slip the next stitch, yarn all the way around, and brioche purl, slip the next stitch, yarn all the way around, and you'll do this until you come to the sort of last 3 stitches. These 2 stitches together, this brioche stitch and then a single stitch. You're going to brioche purl or burp that last stitch or last 2 stitches, second to last 2 stitches I should say, and then this last stitch you're just gonna slip. Okay, now we turn the work. Okay, and now you'll notice that both our colors are at the same end of the needle. So our main color and contrasting color. So we just finished a row with this contrasting color. So now, or with the main color, now we're going to work with this one. Okay, the next one. So after you've done the first row, the next row, we're going to start with a purl one. Then we're going to slip this next stitch. Remember, the yarn is in the front. We want to leave the yarn in the front. We slip the next stitch as if to purl. Bring the yarn all the way over. And then these next 2 stitches, you'll notice they're the joint sort of brioche stitch. We're going to purl them together. So we're going to burp them. And that is your repeat through the rest of the row. So the rest of the row, you're going to slip with this yarn in the front. You're going to slip, bring the yarn all the way over, and burp. Slip, bring the yarn all the way over, and burp. Slip, yarn over, and burp. Slip, yarn over, and burp. And you'll do this again till you get to the last 2 stitches. Now your last 2 stitches will just be 2 single stitches, as you can see. You want to slip this stitch, put the yarn all the way over, and then this last stitch, because we don't have a burp stitch here, we just have a single stitch, we're going to purl it. Okay. And now, anytime you have one yarn on one end and the other yarn is still at the other end, you don't turn the work. You slide your stitches all the way to the end. And now you have to bring this yarn all the way across to the other end. So this is now taking us to row 3. So if you follow the pattern, row 3 will tell you that you want to slip the first stitch. Again, we're slipping it purlwise. Then you see that we are at a stitch where we have 2 stitches together, our brioche. We are now going to knit them. Now this time you'll notice that the yarn is naturally in the back, and you want it to stay in the back because you're knitting the next 2 stitches. Then you want to bring the yarn forward, slip that next stitch purlwise, leave the yarn in the front, and we want to knit these next 2 stitches. And that was a brioche stitch, so we're essentially knitting them together or barking them. Next, you follow the same thing. You bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch, and brioche knit or bark the 2 stitches. Bring the yarn forward, slip, bark. Yarn forward, slip, bark, and at the end we have yarn forward, slip, bark. You have the last stitch that's left, you're just going to slip it. Now that both yarns are at the same end, you turn your work and you do the last row. So we just ended with this maroon yarn. We're now going to work with the white yarn and do the last row, which is a knit the first stitch. So knit 1. Then you do a yarn forward, slip that next single stitch purlwise, and now you've come to a brioche stitch, which you have to knit with the yarn forward. We're just going to insert and knit it or bark it, and that's the repeat for the rest of the row. So yarn forward, slip, bark with the yarn in the front, yarn forward, slip, bark, yarn forward, slip, bark, yarn forward, slip, bark. You do this till you're at the last 2 stitches. For the last 2 stitches, you're gonna yarn forward, slip it, and then this last stitch you're just gonna knit. Okay, so that is a 4-row repeat after you've done the setup row. After you've done the setup row, you do 1 row, then you turn the work, you do the next row, don't turn the work, then you do the 3rd row, turn the work, then you do the 4th row, you don't turn the work. So again, a reminder as to if you're not sure which row you're at, or all of a sudden you think, wait, am I at a row where I turn or I don't turn? Remember, if your two working yarns are at two ends of the needle, then you're not turning your work at that point. As long as you know, oh, I just finished with this white yarn, I need to now work with this, with the maroon yarn, with the next yarn, slip the stitches towards the maroon yarn end and get working. So again, we'll be starting with our row 1 again. So I'll just repeat that first row again. For the first stitch, remember, we're slipping it purlwise. So this is, we're back on row 1, slipping it purlwise. We have a brioche stitch that we are purling. Then we slip the next stitch. We take this yarn all the way over, and then we brioche purl or burp that next stitch, slip, yarn all the way over, brioche purl, 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 and then this last stitch we are just going to slip. And now again, you'll see both working yarns are at one end, so I can turn the work and I can get going with my white yarn doing row 2. So as you do it, you'll start to see the brioche stitches form on either side. And on one side you'll have the white as your purl and the maroon as the middle stitches, so stitches in the middle, and then the reversed over here. So when you look at the pattern, you'll realize that it's essentially 2 rows where we're actually purling those brioche stitches, and then it's 2 rows where we're actually knitting those brioche stitches. So 2 rows where we're burping and 2 rows where we're barking. I know it can sound a little confusing. I know it certainly was for me when I first started doing the 2-color brioche, but I think if you know distinctly which one you're designating as your color A and your color B, and you follow the pattern stepwise, you can certainly come to the video, pause it, look at the steps again to try and follow it along, and hopefully you'll be able to master this stitch in no time. If you have any questions as you work on it, definitely leave me a comment and I will do my best to answer it. I was just trying to think of a couple other points that I could tell you about the brioche. So just again, once you're familiar with it, you'll be able to easily recognize which one is a brioche stitch that's sort of together, and then which one is the single stitch. And again, it might help to go back to the single stitch brioche video and watch that before you embark on watching the 2-stitch video or the 2-color brioche video, or on a 2-color brioche project. The last thing I wanted to say is that when you cast off the stitches, and if you're just doing a regular cast off, use these 2 stitches as a single stitch and cast it off. Again, I mentioned that more in detail in my 1-color brioche knit. So I certainly hope you give this 2-color brioche knit a try. And if you have any comments, or if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you have any comments or would like to see additional videos on projects or patterns, please leave me a comment. And to stay tuned of all upcoming videos, subscribe to my channel, Knittycat's Knits. Thanks for watching and happy knitting!